Welcome to Tales from the Trenches, Season 4. Today, it is my absolute honor to have Mike Todd with me.
Here's a story of a fundraiser who was launching his very own web show. Each episode is very short due to edits, so it can really flow. Here's a story of a podcast guest star who was busy raising money of their own. They were each great in their own way, fundraising in his own. Till the one day when Jack asked a guest to join him, and they knew it was much more than a jest, that these guests must somehow form a resource. That's the way they all became the podcast guests. The podcast guests. The podcast guests. That's the way they became the podcast guests.
Mike Todd is a seasoned professional with extensive experience in both wealth management and philanthropy. He likes to say that he's worked on Bay Street and Hastings Street. His passion for spreading the magic of generosity is evident in his work, most recently demonstrated by his launch of Transform Philanthropy. At Transform Philanthropy, Mike dedicates his efforts to helping donors, wealth advisors, and charities with optimizing the giving, stewarding, and receiving of philanthropic capital. He's an expert in leveraging the advantages of donor-advised funds, and he's committed to facilitating strategic and impactful philanthropic initiatives by encouraging strategic giving. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much, Jack. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so why don't we start off with talking a little bit about how philanthropy was spoken about at the Todd dinner table growing up?
Sure. Yeah, good question. Actually, I hadn't thought about that in a while, but we grew up in attending a Christian church. So the concept of the collection plate and putting something into it every Sunday was just normal in our house. And often I can remember as a smaller child, I'd be past the envelope and then you put it in. This Sunday I would put it in. Next Sunday my sister might put it in. So it was instilled in us early on. I'm not sure. I know I couldn't have told you that it was philanthropy. It's just what we did. But I can see how that was early teaching and getting us used to the concept of giving back.
Yeah, and so how did that kind of manifest itself into your adult life as you entered into the real world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I chose to enter the real world by heading down to Bay Street and putting on a fancy suit. And I went to work with Fidelity Investments and did that for 10 years or so. I got to work with people who spent all day thinking about how to grow money. And so money was a regular subject. And I loved what I did. I worked with financial advisors, so I would call on them and promote Fidelity funds to them. And in order to do that, to earn the right to some of their valuable time, you would have to show up with some ideas. Here's a great way to build your business. So I understand that world. I speak the language. And as I said, I loved it. I loved the people I worked with. I loved the job that I had. Um, and I woke up one day, believe it or not, I'm answering your question. I woke up one day and realized that I had kind of arrived. I remember starting the role in the early days. I got a job as a customer service rep making $27,000 a year. I still remember the number. And I woke up on this particular morning. I was the vice president making substantially more than that. And I thought to myself, wow, this is interesting. Is this what the rest of my life's going to look like? And I decided then that no, this is not what I want it to look like. So I'm not quite sure how it happened, but there was a sudden epiphany that this isn't it. And so I turned to the concept of working for a charity. And where that notion came from, I couldn't really explain. But I ended up going to work for World Vision for a year and then went from there, and it kind of grew. But it was just it was a very conscious choice. Now I look back and say I was working at what my purpose is. Then it was just
Right.
something I felt like I had no choice but to make a change.
So you did some work with World Vision in Africa, I believe, right?
I was working in Mississauga, but I did make some
Ah,
trips. South America, and then subsequently, I've made several trips to different African countries.
okay. So you did some work with the nonprofit world, and
Mhm.
now you've gone back to kind of a philanthropic advisory um, role. So
Mhm.
more of an allied professional, as we like to call them.
Yeah, I think that would be about as accurate as you're going to get in trying to describe my journey. From Bay Street, I moved out here to Vancouver. I spent a number of years in the downtown east side working for a tiny little charity. I lived in China for a couple years and then came back and stumbled into a role at Raymond James Canada Foundation where I discovered this thing called the Donor Advised Fund. And I fell passionately in love with it. It's as odd as that sounds, I can't think of any other way to explain it. It was a world where I had one leg in the wealth management camp and one leg in the philanthropic camp. And I did not know that that world existed because it was absolutely perfect for my strange resume and nothing else. So I found my place, I found my people, and I've been in and around or with donor advice funds ever since, really.
So donor advised funds are kind of like the charity buzzword or the
Mm.
philanthropic buzzword as of the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years. And they're kind of becoming the modality of so many who wish to support philanthropic endeavors while maintaining a certain level of control. And donor advised funds in Canada have traditionally lagged behind the donor advised funds in the States. So, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of tell me about what are the pros and cons of doing the donor advised funds?
Okay, good question. That's pretty broad. It's an interesting one because I do find I run into different um feelings about attitudes about donor advice funds. And as I've already confessed, I'm wholesale sold out. I think it's a fantastic way to give, but I also recognize there are people who feel differently. So in my mind, uh, there's a couple of overarching pros that I'll mention. One would be that not only is it a terrific way to give to support the causes and organizations you want to, it's also a really, really effective wealth management planning tool. And this is where I think one of the key positives of a DAF comes up, and a lot of people don't necessarily realize. And that is, if let's just say I'm a generous person and I give away a lot of money every year, year in, year out. On average, let's say I give away $100,000 a year, one charity, five charities, whatever the case is, but it works out to about that. And I just sold my business, and I'm facing a honking big tax bill, as I like to say. And I have some investment accounts with a lot of money in them, and I've done quite well in the markets. I have a lot of capital gains in some of those stocks. So what do? Well, working with my financial advisor, I'm going to take $1 million of stock, put it into my donor advised fund, get that $1 million tax receipt immediately, and hand that off to my accountant, and he can deal with my taxes. That's great. And what I've really done, if nothing else, is I've pre-funded my giving for the next 10 years, let's say. And I have this pool of assets sitting there now it's just helped me immensely with my tax issues. And it's no longer mine. I've given it away. It's an irrevocable donation. But as you say, I won't use the control word because CRA is listening. But I have the ability to provide advice on where I'd like that money to go. I can't have it back. It can only go one direction. So here's this pool sitting there just waiting for me to direct it to particular charities. And I think it's fantastic. But that issue of the separation in time of me donating to my DAF, and that's the donation because I got the receipt, and then me recommending grants from my DAF, they can be at different points in time. And so it's just this amazing tool that I've been doing this for a long time now, and I still discover things about it that just blow my mind. And how flexible it is.
So talk to me. I'm always intrigued by this. Most medium or large size cities, or actually probably even the small ones, have community foundations, right? Which are essentially the same kind of concept, right? You have a fund there, and you get to advise every year as to who the beneficiaries of your benevolence are. So how does a DAF differ from like a funded a community
Yeah,
foundation?
great question. And really, community foundations in Canada and the US are where the DAF really started. The first DAF in the States was in 1932. The first DAF in Canada was 1952 at the Vancouver Foundation, oddly enough. Um, and so it for a lot of decades, it was sort of the not the secret, but it was the playground of community foundations. And so I would say at this point in time, much of the assets in donor advice funds are still with community foundations, but a lot of the independents now and wealth management affiliated and bank affiliated DAFs would be where a lot of the growth is taking place. Most community foundations, most is a strong word. I would say the majority, like that could be 50% plus one, offer a true donor advice fund where I get to provide that advice. They have a lot of other funding options as well, but the donor advice fund is usually in the lineup somewhere. And so they would be the same in a lot of ways. They may not be quite so flexible on what they'll accept, on what it could be invested in while I wait. But they generally would have a donor advised fund option, as well as others which may allow the donor some degree of input, depending on where it's going to go. But as we know, community foundations are really strong in the community, so their focus would be geographic as well.
Mhm, mhm. Wow, wow. Yeah, we're certainly seeing a proliferation of them. I've come across many financial planners in my career. Oftentimes, they're at kind of cross competing priorities, right? Where there's assets under management and the client or the donor's wishes um, kind of go they're opposite ends of the coin, right? Many people say these donor advised funds with some of the financial institutions started by if you were at a bank, there would be no reason for you to take $1 million from Mrs. Smith's account and move it to the, charity's account to just sit there. Especially when so many of the financial advisors are remunerated based on assets under management. So, can you speak a little bit to that kind of double-edged sword, if you look at it
Sure.
that
Yeah,
way?
I can. And it's interesting. I can see why some people would look at it suspiciously, but I can also see the benefits of it. But absolutely. I think one of the benefits of a donor advice fund is that I can continue to work with my trusted advisor, which is important to me. And yes, the advisor gets to continue to manage those assets, which is important to them. But the reality is, especially today, I think that business is definitely evolving. My advisor wants what's best for me, and he knows how important it is to me that my charitable giving be done effectively. And if there's an opportunity for my advisor to provide input and to manage the assets, fantastic. I'm happy with that arrangement. But I know that deep down, especially with younger clients now who are really insisting that their values have to be aligned in with their finances. So, I'm a aging Gen X person, so I've come to that position. But the people coming after me, they come in with that as a starting point. So, if I can work with the advisor, and I can go in and have my annual review, we talk about my RSPs, we talk about my investment accounts, and we talk about my donor advice fund. I think it's a win-win. Could that be abused? Absolutely, but I really don't think it's like that. Do the banks like having DAFs so that the money doesn't leave the shop? Absolutely, no question. But they've got fantastic staff as well, where the client slash donor is being well served. So I see why people look at it suspiciously. In my experience, and as I said earlier, I know that world really well. There might be one or two who create the stereotype, but most advisors I run into genuinely want to do what's best for their client. And especially those that give, they're sensitive to the fact that this is likely one of the most important elements of that client's wealth, and they want to do it right.
Mike, this has been a great eye opener for me. I certainly learned a lot. Hopefully, our listeners did as well. If folks wanted to get hold of you, how would they go about doing
Sure.
that?
Yeah. It's very simple. My email address is mike@transformphilanthropy.ca. Very simple. I kind of live on LinkedIn. You can find me there as well. Happy to chat. I tell people that I'm weirdly passionate about donor advised funds, so I will talk to anybody anytime about any aspect of it, or answer these questions. Yeah, I think it's really important work. I really do believe that, and so I'd be happy to connect with folks.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time,
Oh,
Mike.
my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, Jack.